The city had its own rhythm. At times, it felt like chaos sirens cutting through the night, conversations blending into a hum on crowded streets. But to Daniel, it was alive. He had been living there for years, working as an editor at a small publishing house, and he knew the pace well. Mornings were for coffee and subway rides, afternoons for manuscripts and deadlines, evenings for the quiet rituals that kept him anchored. Daniel wasn't unhappy, though there was a quietness to his life, a stillness that seemed to linger in the background. At 26, he had friends, stability, even a sense of direction. But deep inside, he carried a feeling that something was missing, like his own story hadn't yet found its turning point. Elena arrived in the city on a crisp autumn morning, a suitcase dragging behind her on uneven pavement. She came from a small coastal town where the sea dictated the rhythm of life waves in the morning, bonfires at night. The city was overwhelming, with its constant hum and towering buildings, but it was also a place of possibility. She had been offered a position at a design firm, her dream job, and though the thought of being alone in such a vast place frightened her, she embraced it. Her first instinct, after settling into a small rented flat, was to find a bookshop. Books had always been her refuge. She told herself she would buy one on her first day in any new city, a ritual to make the unfamiliar feel a little closer to home. The shop she found was narrow and charming, wedged between a bakery and a florist, its tall windows letting the scent of paper and ink drift outside. She stepped inside, and for a moment, she felt as though she had walked into another world. Daniel was there too, holding a stack of books for work. He was so absorbed in searching the shelves that he didn't notice her at first. Elena wandered slowly, running her fingers along spines until a particular title caught her eye. The Sky Between Us. The book slipped as she pulled it from the shelf, but before it could hit the floor, another hand caught it. She looked up, startled, and met Daniel's eyes. "Careful," he said with a faint smile, handing it back. "This one has a habit of escaping." She laughed, her voice light. Maybe it just wanted to be found. For a heartbeat, they both lingered, the book balanced between them. Finally, she took it, nodding. "Good choice," Daniel added. "It's not perfect, but it has heart. You've read it?" Elena asked, more than once. "Part of the job. But some stories stay with you." She studied him, curious. "And what's your story?" Daniel hesitated, caught off guard. "Still being written, I guess, aren't they all?" She replied softly. They exchanged a few more words, ordinary, simple. And yet, when Daniel left with his stack of books, and Elena walked out with just the Sky Between Us under her arm, both carried the sense that something had shifted. The days passed. Daniel returned to manuscripts and deadlines, but the memory of the girl in the bookshop lingered. He realized he hadn't even asked her name. Elena, meanwhile, was arranging her new life, unpacking boxes, hanging pictures, setting her routines. She placed the book on her bedside table, but didn't start it yet. Something about the way it had come to her made her want to wait. Their paths crossed again on a rainy Thursday. The sky poured relentlessly, and Elena, without an umbrella, huddled under a shop awning. Daniel, balancing coffee and a briefcase, spotted her through the rain. At first, he wasn't sure, but as he drew closer, he knew. "Bookshop girl," he greeted, rain dripping from his hair. "That's not my name." She laughed. "It's all I've got, unless you'd like to tell me the real one." Elena, Daniel, the nameless memory suddenly became something more. They stood together under the awning, rain falling in silver sheets around them. Daniel, after a pause, held out his coffee. "It's not an umbrella, but it's warm. Want a sip?" Elena laughed, again shaking her head. "That's probably the worst offer I've had all week. Give me time, I'm better at conversation." So she challenged him to prove it. And there, while the rain poured, they talked. About the city, about books, about her painting all the wrong color once and living with it for years. About his failed attempt to learn guitar, his single clumsy song. The exchange was light, scattered, but it carried warmth. When the rain finally eased, neither wanted to leave. "Maybe," Daniel said, "we should let the rain decide. Next time it pours, we'll meet again. And if it doesn't rain," she teased, "then we'll find another excuse." Over the next weeks, excuses seemed to appear everywhere. They ran into each other at a market, at a CAF near her office, once even on the subway. Each meeting stretched into conversation, into laughter, into the comfort of familiarity. Daniel began to notice details. The way Elena brushed her hair behind her ear when she was thoughtful. the way she tilted her head slightly when considering something. Elena, in turn, found herself drawn to his quiet steadiness, his dry humor, his ability to make even silence feel comfortable. One evening, they ended up walking together along the river. The city lights shimmered across the water, and autumn air carried a bite. Do you ever feel like you're exactly where you're supposed to be? Elena asked suddenly. Daniel looked at her, then at the glowing skyline. Sometimes. Tonight, maybe, she smiled, and for a moment, it was enough. As days turned to weeks, their bond deepened. They shared small rituals, morning coffees when their schedules aligned, late-night phone calls when they didn't. Elena brought him sketches of designs she was working on. Daniel slipped her books he thought she'd like. One night, they cooked dinner at her apartment. It was simple pasta, wine, laughter when the sauce spilled, but it felt like home. When Daniel left, Elena lingered at the door, watching him disappear into the night. She realized then that the city didn't feel so overwhelming anymore. Daniel, too, felt it, the shift from ordinary days into something warmer, fuller. He hadn't planned it, hadn't expected it, but Elena had become the chapter his story had been waiting for. Weeks later, the first snow arrived. They were walking together through the city park, their breaths visible in the cold air. Children threw snowballs. Lights twinkled in nearby shops, and the world felt suspended in white stillness. Elena caught a snowflake in her palm, watching it melt. I think this is my favorite kind of silence, she said. Daniel smiled. What kind is that? The kind that feels alive. He looked at her then, the snow catching in her hair, and knew he was falling. But love rarely arrives without shadows. Even as their connection grew, small challenges appeared, conflicting schedules. Daniel's hesitance to open up about his past, Elena's lingering homesickness. None of it was enough to break them. But beneath the laughter and closeness, tension waited. It began subtly. A missed call here, a postponed meeting there. Daniel, absorbed in a demanding project, pulled long nights at work. Elena, dealing with pressure at the design firm, found herself both exhausted and needing him more. One evening, they planned to meet for dinner. Elena waited at the restaurant, her fingers tapping the table, minutes stretching into nearly an hour. Daniel finally arrived, apologizing, but the exhaustion on his face mirrored her frustration. You could have called, she said softly. I know. I should have. It wasn't a fight, not really. But it left a silence between them that neither quite knew how to fill, and yet, despite the small cracks, the bond endured. For every missed moment, there were others. Shared laughter over late-night pizza, quiet talks while walking home, the warmth of knowing that even in a vast city, they had found each other. Still, both Daniel and Elena felt the weight of something unspoken, the possibility of love, and the fear of what it demanded. Winter deepened, and with it came both beauty and heaviness. The city streets glittered with festive lights, shop windows glowed with decorations, and yet beneath the surface, Daniel and Elena found themselves drifting between closeness and distance. Daniel's work consumed him. The publishing house had taken on a massive project, a series of manuscripts that required endless editing and long nights. He tried to balance it, tried to be present, but more often than not, he was pulled into deadlines. Elena understood at first. She admired his dedication, respected his passion, but she also felt herself waiting for texts that came later than they used to, for plans that were postponed, for a presence that was slipping. One night, after another cancelled dinner, Elena sat in her apartment with the scribe between us unopened beside her. She picked it up at last, reading through the first pages. The story spoke of two people who found each other against all odds, only to face the challenge of whether love could survive the weight of their separate worlds. As she read, Elena felt a quiet ache. Wasn't that exactly what she and Daniel were beginning to live? The conflict finally broke open one Friday evening. Daniel arrived late to her place, shoulders heavy, eyes tired. You forgot again, Elena said softly, the dinner she had cooked growing cold on the table. I didn't forget, he said, his voice low. I just couldn't leave work. It feels the same, she whispered. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Elena, Daniel began. I'm trying. You know that, right? I do, she admitted. But sometimes I wonder if there's space for me in the middle of all that trying. Her words pierced him, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back, needing distance. That night, Daniel walked home alone through falling snow. the city lights blurring in his vision. He realized how fragile love could feel. Even when it was real, days passed with less contact. Their conversations became shorter, more careful, as if both were afraid of saying the wrong thing. Elena buried herself in work, though loneliness crept in at the edges. Daniel, too, felt the weight of absence, but pride and exhaustion held him back from reaching out. Then, one evening, Elena received a call from her hometown. Her mother had fallen ill, not gravely, but enough to need care. Without hesitation, Elena packed a bag and boarded a train. When Daniel found out, it was from a brief message, going home for a while. Don't know how long. He stared at the words, his chest tightening. He wanted to call, to tell her he was sorry, to tell her not to leave things this way. But he hesitated, the silence stretching until it was too late. Weeks passed. Elena's days filled with family responsibilities, quiet evenings by the sea, long walks on familiar sand. She missed the city, but more than that, she missed Daniel, his voice, his steadiness, even the arguments that had shown how much they mattered to each other. Daniel, meanwhile, lived in a haze. Work continued, days blurred, but something vital was missing. He caught himself looking for her in CAFS, on the subway, in the bookshop where they had first met. Each time, the emptiness deepened. At last, on a sleepless night, he picked up The Sky Between Us, the same copy Elena had once held. He read through its pages, and with each chapter, he felt the echo of their own story. Two people separated by circumstance, by fear, by silence, but bound by something greater. By the time he closed the book at dawn, Daniel knew he couldn't let their story end this way. When spring arrived, Elena returned to the city. Her mother was recovering, her responsibilities eased, but she felt different, more certain of what she wanted, more aware of what she needed. She didn't expect Daniel to be waiting. In fact, she half expected that whatever they had shared might have quietly ended during the weeks apart. But on her second evening back, as she walked through the city park where they had once wandered in the snow, she saw him, Daniel, standing beneath the budding trees, holding a familiar book in his hands. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying both relief and uncertainty. She stopped, heart racing. "How did you know I'd be here?" "I didn't," he admitted. "I just hoped." For a long moment neither spoke. The air was filled with spring birdsong, with the laughter of children, with the quiet hum of the city coming back to life. Finally, Daniel stepped closer. "I read it," he said, lifting the book. "The Sky Between Us. And I realized something." "What?" she asked softly. "That stories don't end because things get hard. They end when people stop choosing each other. And I don't want to stop choosing you." Tears welled in her eyes. She had waited weeks to hear words like these. But now that they came, she realized how much she had needed them. "I was afraid," she confessed. "Afraid you didn't have space for me." "I was afraid too," Daniel said. "Afraid I'd fail you. Afraid I'd lose you." "But Elena." "I don't want fear to write our story." The silence that followed was full, alive. Exactly the kind Elena had once said she loved. She stepped forward, placing her hand in his. "Then let's keep writing it." From that day, their love grew differently, not without challenges, but with more honesty, more courage. Daniel learned to balance work with presence, to let Elena into the spaces he once guarded. Elena learned to trust that love could survive distance, silence, even fear, if it was chosen every day. They built new rituals. Sunday mornings at the bookshop, where it all began. Evening walks through the park, no matter the season. Shared meals cooked imperfectly, but with laughter, and sometimes, when it rained, they still stood together under a single awning, remembering the day their story had truly begun. Months later, on a summer evening, Daniel and Elena found themselves at the river again. The city lights shimmered on the water, just as they had months before. "Do you still feel like you're where you're supposed to be?" Elena asked, echoing her own question from the past. Daniel looked at her, at the way the wind caught her hair, at the certainty in her eyes. "More than ever," she smiled. And this time, it wasn't just enough, it was everything.